Today, we're taking a closer look at the front lower control arms with ball joints for the 1994 to 2004 Mustangs. If you're looking to improve front end stability, steering precision, or you simply just want to refresh some worn out control arms and ball joints, then this is going to be a great option. These front lower control arms are designed to restore or enhance your Mustang's suspension geometry. Each arms comes complete with an integrated ball joint, eliminating the need to press in a separate joint and speeding up that installation process, which we'll show you here in a minute if you stick with me. The reinforced high-strength steel construction minimizes that flex under load and helps maintain precision alignment angles during aggressive driving. This contributes to improved steering feel and cornering stability, especially on lifted or lowered Mustangs. Also, these control arms are engineered to provide tighter tolerances and reduce deflection compared to aging OEM components, helping your Mustang feel more responsive and predictable in handling. Whether you're taking your car to the track or you just want a crisp feel on the streets, these are a great option. These are made from heavy-duty stamped steel with welded gussets to reinforce strength, and these arms are matched with factory spec ball joints to simplify that installation, and they're made from corrosion resistant materials. The bushings are pre-pressed and greased at the factory for consistent performance and an easier install. This kit has an anti-corrosion layer and it's pre-greased for the added longevity and decreasing maintenance needs over time. Now, as far as the pricing goes, this is coming in right in that low 300s price range. You're getting a complete set of front lower control arms with already pre-pressed ball joints for a price that's not going to break the bank. When it comes to the install on this is going to be rated just a 1 out of 3 wrenches on a difficulty meter, and you can expect to spend about 2 hours to get this job done. Now let's head on out to the shop, and they're going to give you a detailed walkthrough of exactly how this install process goes.
All right, for this install, you're going to need a 1/2-inch breaker bar, a pry bar, a 1/2-inch impact, 3/8 impact, a 21, a 24, and a 17 mil wrench, a ball joint puller, a 3/8 ratchet, a 1/4-inch ratchet, a 1/4-inch extension, a E8 inverted Torx. You will need a 15 millimeter deep socket, a 15 mil swivel socket, an 18 mil deep socket, a 21 and a 24 mil socket, along with a swivel head and a 3-inch extension, pair of vice grips, and a mallet. Also not shown on camera, you will need a spring compressor, a floor jack, and jack stands. Today we're going to be installing front control arms on our Mustang, but first let's watch a quick uninstall video before we get started. One thing to note, that in the video, they do remove the entire sway bar because it's being swapped out, but just note that all you have to do for this install is you're gonna just need to unbolt the end links from the actual control arm.
All right, so moving on to the front, you can see that I have both of my wheels and tires off. I've already disconnected the sway bar end link on the driver's side, so I'm gonna do the same on the passenger side here. It's a 15 millimeter nut. So let's get this nut off and this bushing as well. If that doesn't come off, it's fine. You can usually hit it up, hit the sway bar up, and both those bushings will pop. All right, so now we're gonna remove our sway bar end links. Again, I have that 15 mil deep socket on my air ratchet, and then I have a 10 millimeter wrench on the shaft of the end link, just to keep it from spinning. Just gonna start this nut. And pull that end link out of here. Remove that on both sides. All right, now we're going to remove our sway bar. You can see this is our mounting point with our bushing in there. These are 16 millimeter nuts. There are 2 on each side. And this plastic piece right here, we're actually gonna snake it through. So I'm going to buzz these off. Hoping that plastic is going to keep it up while I remove the other side. All right, now I'm going to snake this out of here. So there are some push pins that we can remove on the inside of here. Let me get my tool real quick. This inner fender. So there's that push pin. It's a Christmas tree type clip. We are going to slide our sway bar out of the way. All right, so what we're gonna do now is remove our caliper and rotor. First, starting with our caliper, we're gonna take the whole unit off. So we're after these two 15mm bolts on the back side. So let's get a breaker bar on here first. Make sure that we can loosen them up. All right, now let me get my air ratchet in here. And just to get ready, I have my caliper hanger right there. I'll keep that where my body bolt is. All right, and then we're gonna hang this caliper out of the way. All right, so next up, we're gonna remove our rotor. If you haven't replaced your brakes or removed your rotor yet, you may still have these factory locking washers. R99 only has about 40,000 miles on it, so these are the original brakes. And we're going to remove these little metal washers, like the lock tabs that hold your rotor onto the hub itself. So you don't need to replace these or put them back on. I'll show you a trick when I reinstall the wheel, how to get your rotor to stay in place. But I just bend it so it's a misshape and then just spin it off. And now we can pull our rotor off. All right, so what we're gonna do next is remove our wheel speed sensor or our ABS sensor right here. And we need an E8 E-bit. So it's like an inverted Torx. And I have this on my 1/4-inch drive, so I'm just going to loosen this up and remove it. Because we gotta separate our spindle from our strut here in a second. And we don't wanna cause any unnecessary stress on this wheel speed sensor because they aren't cheap. All right, so that's out. All right, so let's remove that wheel speed sensor. I'm just gonna push it in the front and pull it in the back as well at the same time, because this has not been removed since new. There's a lot of road grime on that. All right, so that's out. Then I'm gonna take my push pin removal tool and get this loom out of the way. And then lift up on these. And just get that out of the way. Again, this is a magnet, so you can just stick it to a body part and it'll be out of the way. All right, so our next step is to remove this 124mm nut holding this little brake line bracket in place. So just spin this off. We are going to attach that again later. And then we're going to lower the vehicle down to the ground so we can get a jack onto the lower control arm. And then we're going to remove the two nut and bolts holding our strut assembly to our spindle. And what that will do is release the tension on that pocket spring so we can lower the jack, get that spring out, and get our strut out all at the same time. All right, so as you can see, I have a jack directly under my lower control arm. The vehicle is pretty low to the ground, and what I'm going to do is now jack up on my jack and take up some of that tension on my pocket spring. Now I can remove the nut and bolt on my lower strut assembly. I'm gonna need a 21 millimeter socket for my bolt head on this side, and then a 24 millimeter socket for my nut side. Let's go ahead and get our tools in place here. All right, there's the first nut. And let's get the second one out of here. Second nut, I'm gonna try to pull one of these bolts out. All right, there's one, there's two. Then I'm going to let my spindle just hang out here. And you see my strut is free now. Now I can lower my jack slowly and have this pocket spring come out. But first I'm going to remove my strut so I have some more room to play with. All right, now we're going to remove our strut. I'm gonna start off by removing these nuts. These are 15 millimeter. Now I'm going to hold on to my strut, take out this last bolt. Make sure you grab that and remove your strut. All right, so now I'm going to release the tension on my jack and watch what happens to my pocket spring. It's gonna wanna fall out of there. So I may need a pry bar to help get it out. That's what we're gonna do now. All right, so there may still be a little bit of tension on this spring, so just be very careful and wary of that. And there it goes.
All right, welcome back. Now that we have everything out of our way, we have the spring removed, we can have better access to the control arm, and we also have the end link, like I had mentioned previously, disconnected from the control arm. Now we can remove our ball joint bolt and pull that out of the knuckle. We're gonna use our 24 mil socket. Remove that. All right, we're gonna slide our puller on the back end of the knuckle over top of our ball joint. And we're gonna wanna get that as centered as we can. Using a ratchet or whatever combination you need to get on there. Once that pushes through, should be able to just push that down. Apply some pressure on your lower control arm, and now you can use a bungee cord or a caliper hanger and hang this out of the way. All right, now that I have the knuckle out of the way of my lower control arm, I used a caliper hanger to secure it out of the way. You can use whatever combination, bungee cord, to get it out of your way so you can drop this down. Now we're gonna lift the vehicle up so we can get better access to the bolts. Now we're gonna move on to the lower control arm bolts. On the rear back bolt side, we're gonna have a 21 mil socket here, and on the front end, we're gonna use a 24 mil wrench. All right, the impact did not move the bolt for us, so we're gonna switch to a breaker bar. 21 mil socket on the head, and 24 on the nut. All right, now we can probably switch to our gun and zip it all the way off. All right, we're gonna leave the bolt in there just to keep it up out of our way. Attach our 24 on the inside. All right, with the inner tie rod boot being there, we're gonna use our 3-inch extension on our breaker bar and loosen it up. All right, now we can switch to our impact. All right, while trying to get these control arm bolts out, we did find that the bolt head hits this frame bolt right here. We're going to undo that temporarily so we can get the bolt out of the way. All right, for the front bolt, we found that the power steering rack boot for the tie rod is in the way a little bit, so we're gonna remove this nut completely, and we're also gonna loosen the passenger side. This is an 18mm bolt. We're gonna use a 17mm wrench on the back end. All right, now we're just gonna use a pry bar and gently pry up on the power steering rack to get this bolt out. All right, just to give myself some extra support, I did reinstall the rear bolt. And now we can remove that. And remove the whole assembly. All right, once you got your control arm out of its assembly here and all the bolts free and out of the way, you're gonna wanna repeat the same steps for the other side. Okay, now we're gonna take our new control arm and get it lined up in our housing. And we may need to tap it with a mallet to get it in. Once you have that tapped in, get it lined up, put in your rear bolt, and move on to your front. All right, now you can move on to your front bolt. Once again, you're gonna need to pry up a little bit on the power steering rack. Get the bolt in there, apply some pressure. Could also use our mallet in this situation and tap it in. All right, once we have it all the way in, line that up, push it all the way through, and then we're gonna attach your nuts to the inside and we'll tighten those up. All right, now that we have the control arm in, we can put back our power steering rack the way it's supposed to be. Move it down to its out of adjustment from where it was. After you get that tightened down, you want to come back and make sure and torque everything down and repeat for the other side. All right, now we're going to install our nuts for our 24mm on the lower control arms. Use our 24mm wrench and a 21 socket just to tighten that down. Now for our back bolt, we can use a swivel to get on there with a 21 and a 24 wrench. And once you get that nice and tight, you want to come back and torque everything down and repeat the same steps for the other side. All right, now that we have our bolt tightened down, we can install back our frame bolt and come back and torque that down. Now that we have our lower control arm bolts in, we're going to remove our knuckle assembly off of the sway bar or wherever you hung it out of the way and lift the knuckle onto the ball joint. All right, once that sits in the perch there, you can take your new hardware, your 24mm nut, thread it on, and we're gonna tighten that down. All right, now that we have our nut threaded on, we can use our impact with our 24mm socket to tighten it down. All right, once we got that tightened, we're gonna wanna come back and torque everything down and repeat the same steps on the other side. All right, to make it a little bit easier for ourselves, we lifted the car up higher and we're gonna use a different pry bar to get this in there. All right, now that we have our spring situated, we used our spring compressor tool. If you don't have one of these, you can always rent one of these from an automotive shop. We're going to place our spring into the perch and still need to apply a little bit of pressure downward to get it situated correctly. All right, once we have that in there, we can make any adjustments and rotate as we need. Now we're just gonna undo our spring compressor. All right, now that we brought our vehicle down, we're gonna use a floor jack to compress the spring. We're gonna wanna focus on getting the sway bar end link lined up into the control arm. And you can just let that rest on the inside of that edge. All right, now we can place our strut into the tower. Try to get it in line with our knuckle. And once we have that sitting there, all right, once we have our strut lined up in the knuckle, we can attach the lower bolt into the knuckle to help support. And if we can also attach the top one. You might need to go up or down on the floor jack to get this bolt in there. All right, now that we have our strut in, we can use our jack to raise our strut a bit so we can get our bushing on. Install our plate and our 21 mil socket. All right, we're gonna wanna come back after we tighten that down and torque everything on down spec. All right, next we're gonna take our 24 mil nuts for our strut mount, put those on and tighten them down. Might need a 21 mil wrench on the back end to hold this tight. And the 24 nut on this side. Make sure that's tight. All right, we're gonna wanna come back and retorque everything down to factory spec. All right, now we can put our wheel speed sensor bracket on. Get that lined up. Use our 24 mil socket to tighten that down. Now we can install our wheel speed sensor. And we can tighten this down with our E8 inverted Torx. And then you want to make sure and clip any of the wires back into the bracket. All right, next we're going to install our rotor. And if you do have the factory retaining clips, you might want to put those on as well. Then you can remove your caliper from your hanger. All right, now we can take our caliper and slide it back onto the rotor. All right, once we have our caliper bracket in, we can put our mounting bolts back on. All right, we can tighten those down with our 15 mil socket, and we'll go back and retorque that down to factory spec. Now we can attach our sway bar end link to the control arm, install the factory bushing, and the factory hardware. Thread that on. Use our 15 mil socket, tighten it down. And you can use vice grips up here again to clamp it down, but you will need to torque everything back down to spec. And you're gonna repeat the same exact steps for the other side. All right, that wraps up our install for front lower control arms with ball joints on 99 to 04 Mustang. Just remember, for everything Mustang related, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.